After a long 82-game NBA season filled with drama, woj bombs, and historic moments, the 2023 playoffs are set to get underway. 16 teams have entered their name in the hat, but just one will ultimately crown the winner. In this video, I will showcase my predictions of the outcome of this year's playoffs and who I think will be the last one standing at the end of it. Warning, this is a prediction video, and some of my choices will upset some of you. In the end, only one team can win. You are welcome to tell me if you disagree with my predictions, or you can just make your own. Also, these are my legitimate predictions. I know some people, when making this type of video, like to pick a different result, maybe one they might not agree with, but just to be different. This video won't have any of that. Whatever I pick is truly how I feel. Some might shock you, some might not. Without further ado, let's get into it. Here we have the bracket. Let's just start with the Western Conference, which all I can say right now that is going to be fireworks. The first matchup we are going to take a look into is the number 1 seeded Denver Nuggets against the number 8 Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves just clinched their spot after defeating the Thunder in a blowout fashion. Let me remind you, this is the same team who lost to the Lakers in one of the most hard-watched games of the season, pairing up with Denver with two of the best bigs in the league, with Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, against who you could argue being the best big man in the league, Nikola Jokic, which is set to make an interesting matchup. These two teams split the season series 2-2, with all those at home winning every matchup. But the Timberwolves are numbers down going into this, with the absence of both Naz Reid and their best defender Jim McDaniels, along with tensions which won't go away even after their OKC victory. With home victories in mind, I got the Denver Nuggets beating the Timberwolves in 5, sending Minnesota to an interesting offseason, which I see them making a big upcoming decision. Next, we have the 2-7 matchup with the Memphis Grizzlies and the Los Angeles Lakers. The new-look Lakers have been on a surge since the deadline, finishing 16 wins to 7 losses, ranking number 1 in the league. On the other hand, the Grizzlies have been good throughout the season, so safe to say this one will be going the distance. Sadly, injuries will have major impacts in this. Two of Memphis' best bigs, Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, have been rolled out for the series. And by telling about how Anthony Davis has been on a tear, this will be a problem. Along with one side having plenty more experience, and LeBron, I got the Lakers beating the Grizzlies in 6. This brings us to our 3-6 matchup with the Sacramento Kings facing the Golden State Warriors. This, in my opinion, is going to be the best Western Conference first round series. The two teams play like 2 hours away from each other. Kings made history this year, ending their 16-year playoff drought come to a close, and what do you know, they have to play the defending champions Golden State. But while they look the same from last year, it does not feel the same. The Warriors this season are notorious for their road losses, along with the absence of Andrew Wiggins, who is reported to return for the playoffs. Questions lie on how rusty he will be. The number 1 offense Kings with a lot of firepower on the floor against a Golden State team who's proven never to doubt them. This series I see going to 7 games. With that being said, I have the Sacramento Kings ironically beating the Warriors, ending their dynasty. In the final West matchup, we have the 4-seeded Suns against the 5th-seeded Clippers. This will also be another good series, especially considering the dynamic differences both these teams have. On one side, the Suns post-trade deadline when acquiring Kevin Durant have skyrocketed in Vegas odds, along with an 8-0 record when playing in the new Suns lineup. While that number seems impressive, it's a result of Durant missing a lot of games from an ankle injury just before his home debut. And not to mention that the teams they won against during that stretch were not very good. Going into the series with single-digit games to build chemistry, along with not having a bench, it's something not to feel confident about. On the other hand, the Clippers are not entering a clean state either, with their second man Paul George injured and potentially not playing in this series. However, unlike the Suns, the Clippers are known to always have a good bench, and this year is no different. While the Suns on paper have 4 very good players, I don't believe just 8 games and a bad bench will be enough to sustain for a playoff run. With that being said, even without Paul George, I think the Clippers and playoff Kawhi have the advantage, and I have them winning in 6. Moving on to the East, unlike the West, I don't think it's going to come out hot. Instead, I see it start off mid and get better over the course of the playoffs. Starting with the 1-8 matchup is the 1st-seeded and best record in the league Milwaukee Bucks versus last year's 1st seed Miami Heat. With that in mind, you can see how hard the Heat fell off, losing first in the play-in against Trey and the Mid-Hawks to now having to play the team who swept them 2 years ago on a way to a championship. It's clear the Heat are in need for adjustments and have bigger concerns than a playoff run. On that note, I have the Bucks winning the series in 5. Moving on with the 2-seeded Celtics against the Hawks, which said before clinched their spot after beating the Heat, take on last year's Eastern Conference champions on the road to redemption. It would not be the first time the Hawks could upset, as 2 years ago, they had a Cinderella run where they ended up in the Eastern Conference Finals. Since then, they have came back to earth, and this season were the definition of mid. I mean, just look at these stats. This team is beyond mid, which is why they won't be the Celtics, but neither will they be swept. I have Boston winning in 5. Next up, we have the 3-6 matchup with the Philadelphia 76ers and the new look Nets. This is not the same Nets we had at the beginning of the season, with trading away both their star players, Kevin Durant and Kyrie, to acquire several role players. I will say credit to this Nets team for maintaining a playoff spot, considering they have no star players, which I see changing soon, looking at how Mikal Bridges has been balling since the trade. They have no easy task, playing against the Sixers, with who's probably going to win the MVP, Joel Embiid. Philly has something to prove this season, and their Nets are in their way from a rematch with Boston. I don't even think the Nets believe they can win the series, and neither do I. The Nets to me look similar to the Jazz early on in the season, filled with role players, and they played really well, which is why I can see the Nets putting up a fight, but that won't change the result. I have the Sixers winning in 6. Finally, we have the 4-5 matchup with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. I have this being the best first round matchup in the East, based on how even I think this matchup will be. A rematch between Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson is going to be one for the ages. In regards on who will win this matchup, there's no doubt in my mind this series will go to 7. To me, the Cavs are somewhat similar to the Suns. They have several all-star caliber players and were built to be a juggernaut. On the other hand, the Knicks seem to be more balanced through and through and built to go the distance. Going back to having the series going to 7 is exactly why I'm choosing the Knicks to pull it out in advance. Now we move on to the semifinals. Returning to the West, we have the first seeded Denver Nuggets taking on the 5th seed Los Angeles Clippers. A rematch of 2020 and something many Clippers fans would want to see at redemption. If Paul George has not returned thus far, he will more than likely return in this series, which will be huge for the Clippers, but there is one small problem. Actually, it's a big one. They have to play the Denver Nuggets. If you are not familiar by what I mean, just take a look at this. If there's a definition for kryptonite, you are looking at it. Since the bubble, the Nuggets have had the Clippers number, and I don't see that changing in this series. While the photo before you might suggest a possible sweep, that's in no way happening. The Clippers will always be a handful, regardless of who they play. I have the Nuggets winning in 6. Moving on to our second semifinal, it's the Sacramento Kings versus the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't think this is a matchup anyone would have expected if you told them at the start of the season, but I am predicting it will happen. Unlike the Grizzlies, the Kings are known for availability, being quote-unquote the healthiest team this season. Beating the defending champs is no easy task, so they are more than capable of facing a LeBron-led playoff team. I have the Kings winning in 6. Returning to the East, we have the first seeded Milwaukee Bucks against the 5th seed New York Knicks. Something to point out of the East so far is everything really surrounds 2 teams, both having the first and second best record in the league, Milwaukee and Boston. That does not mean you should count out the other 2 teams at all. Just like I saw the Knicks do to the Cavs, I see them doing the same to the Bucks. This series will go the distance, though I don't think in the end they will win, but I do think they will shock many people. I have the Bucks winning in 7. Following up, we have the Celtics against the 76ers. Another 2020 rematch with the more loaded Sixers squad. While they have gotten stronger since last time they matched up in the postseason, so have the Celtics by a wide margin. I find the Celtics to be a deeper and more reliant team, but the Sixers definitely have a counter. If Embiid can play at MVP level this series, along with prime Harden performances, the Sixers can definitely win. It really comes down to how much can you trust the Sixers foundation, and I really don't. Consecutive second round exits and Harden's playoff history is not a strong sell. But that being said, I have the Celtics winning in 6. Moving on to the conference finals, we first have the Denver Nuggets against the Sacramento Kings. This series will be something new for the people instead of the same old. 2 small market teams facing off for a chance to go to the finals is not something you can write any better. In regards to the matchup, 2 of the best on the offensive ends, and while I find both to be the best in their respective group on the West, I don't think this matchup will quite go the distance. I see momentum being in play in this stage of the playoffs. Along with matchups, I can see the Nuggets making quick work. I have the Nuggets winning in 5. Now, moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals, we have the first seeded Milwaukee Bucks versus the second seeded Boston Celtics. These 2 teams have no doubt been the best in the league this season. This could be considered as an NBA final matchup, only that it would be before the actual NBA Finals. Along with, we could see the what if. If Chris Middleton was healthy, would have the Bucks beat the Celtics and go on to possibly repeat as NBA champions. In their last series, they win the full length of 7 games, and I don't see it any different this time around. This will be a very grueling series and fun for the fans to watch. Return to the what if these two teams head to head and healthy, would the results change from last year? I don't think so. Both are talented, but I find the Celtics to be the better team and defeating the Bucks again. I have the Celtics winning in 7. Finally, we have the NBA Finals. The Denver Nuggets versus the Boston Celtics. The 2nd overall Celtics versus the 4th overall Denver Nuggets. The Boston Celtics are looking for redemption after their defeat last year to the Warriors, taking on a team that many wonder where would they be today if they never suffered injuries to Jamal Murray, including 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic. A lot of hesitance of giving Jokic his 3rd MVP came from never making it to a final, and only a major postseason accomplishment coming from the bubble, which is still highly speculated for validity. While Jokic hasn't gotten a fair chance due to said injuries of teammates, that's how the game goes. Both teams have something to prove. Returning to Boston, who just had to win against the Bucks, now having to play the Denver Nuggets, who I don't see having to play at such an extreme measure, is not a good start. Then having to play at Denver with true home court with the altitude, I don't see it work out for Boston. With that being said, I have the Denver Nuggets winning the NBA championship in 6.